just the responsibility of Democrats. This is a scourge in our society that hits everybody without regard to partisanship, and this has to have a bipartisan solution. I invite my colleagues on the other side of the aisle to join us and to find a solution to the problem of gun violence and gun deaths. But I just want to say this to my Republican colleagues. Any conversation about gun violence prevention that does not include guns, I will say to you what Logan Roy said to his children in succession: you are not serious people. Be a serious person, join us, and let's address this problem. Let's keep our kids safe. Let's keep our communities safe. Let's do something. And that is why we are here today. We are talking about doing something. Thank you.
Good afternoon. Welcome to this third town hall on gun violence in Minnesota. My name is Rolf Olson, and I will be the moderator. Before we begin, though, I want to take a moment to recognize the people who made this conversation possible. To the elected officials who are joining us this afternoon, thank you for your continued commitment to protecting Minnesota families from gun violence. We know that's why you're here with us today. To the survivors of gun violence, I know some of you are here. Thank you for coming. Your strength and your resilience reminds us of why this work matters. And to the families, to the friends, to the community members from Annunciation Catholic Church and School, our hearts have been with you every day since that terrible day 10 weeks ago. Your presence here means so much to all of us. Every year, over 500 Minnesota citizens die from gun violence, gunfire. 70% of those deaths are by gun suicide. Of course, mass shootings get the most press. And we're all horrified. We were all horrified by the shootings at Annunciation back in August. Most of the deaths in Minnesota are by handguns. Most of those shootings get very little press. In October 2007, my daughter Catherine answered a Craigslist ad for a nanny in Savage. She arrived to meet a 19-year-old holding his father's unsecured pistol, and it was over in 5 minutes. He wanted to kill someone. He posted a fake ad on Craigslist to lure some unsuspecting victim to his home, and my daughter was the victim. He disposed of her body. He put the bullet casing under his pillow. He went to work and used her credit card to buy gas on the way. He's now a permanent resident at Bayport Prison. As a gun owner myself, and as a police chaplain for 17 years, I know well the dangers of firearms. As a pastor, I've buried several people who've died by gunfire. Surveys show that over 60% of Americans claim to have some way that they've been affected by gun violence. And of course, all of our children go through active gun shooter drills. In the afternoon after the shooting at Annunciation, the phone rang at my son's house in South Minneapolis. Their son's friend, another 8-year-old, and a student at Annunciation wanted to come over to hold their 2 dogs. He needed some dog therapy, which the Pooches were most willing to give him. Well, the trauma of gun violence has affected not only my children, but now my grandchildren. So for the next hour, we're going to try to sort out our thoughts and potential responses to this public health crisis. So now I have the privilege of introducing our panelists this afternoon. Governor Tim Walz is the 41st governor of Minnesota. He's a veteran of the Army National Guard, a former teacher and coach, and a longtime public servant. Under his leadership, Minnesota has made historic progress, providing universal free school meals, protecting reproductive freedom, cutting middle-class taxes, strengthening voting rights, expanding paid family and medical leave, and setting the state on a path to 100% clean electricity by 2040. So I invite Governor Walz to share some remarks with us now.
I think we're on. There we go. Well, thank you, Pastor, and thank you for sharing and trusting us with your personal story of this. Unfortunately, way too many people have personal tragedy stories in this space. To my fellow panelists who are here, thank you, Tess. As we said, you're getting to know your daughter post-Annunciation, and we're all changed and we're all different because of it, and you're going to hear the medical side of this. To the legislators who are here, thank you. Thank you for continued leadership. And to each of you, taking time out of your lives to be here. And you heard it, the public health crisis we have around firearms is simply unacceptable. The #1 cause of death for children age 1 to 19 is firearms. That is not true in any other nation around the world. There has been a choice made in this country of what we value and what we don't value. And we have made a decision in Minnesota that we are choosing to not live like this anymore. We are going to make a decision to move towards responsible firearms ownership. And as you heard Rolf say, I was one of tens of thousands of Minnesotans who got up before the sun and sat in a cold tree stand and partake in a time-honored tradition of deer hunting. And not a single one of them needed an assault weapon or a high-capacity magazine, and not a single one of them had any infringement on their Second Amendment rights. These legislators and the people of Minnesota made a decision back in 2023 that we were going to use data and research and make things safer for people. So we passed enhanced background checks, making sure that people who shouldn't have guns don't get them. And we passed something called an extreme risk protection order. And as Pastor said, a lot of these deaths are suicides by firearms, and they're in greater Minnesota in many cases across the state. And what the extreme risk protection order did was give family members and law enforcement the opportunity to intervene before a tragedy like Annunciation happened, before someone murdered, like we saw with Melissa and Mark and the shooting of John and Yvette, or countless others that get wrapped up in the violence around this. And we know that the data showed of those 390 some risk protection orders, we definitely saved lives. And when we tried to pass those, just like we're trying to have this conversation around assault weapons and high-capacity magazines and ghost guns and binary triggers, we're met with resistance and stalling and reasons. And we were told, why would we pass risk protection orders? They won't save any lives. We have the data now to show that it did. So what I've asked Minnesotans after a summer of tragedy, after a breaking point for so many of us, let's have a conversation. And I've asked us simply to put on the floor of the House and Senate a vote on whether we should have limitations on these weapons of war that were designed. In the case of Annunciation, 116 bullets flew into that church and into little bodies in 61 seconds. They're designed to do that because they're designed for the battlefield. And we have always had limitations. You can't own a howitzer. You can't own a missile. These things were designed to cause maximum damage. And we've said, let's have a debate. And I continue to say this. And we've invited bipartisan legislators to come here. If you think this is a bad idea to limit these weapons, then you should probably stand on the floor of the House of Representatives, say so, and then vote no. And that's all we're asking, just to vote. We're not getting a vote. And I think all of you in here need to recognize why we're not getting a vote. We're not getting a vote because it would pass. That's why we're not getting a vote. It would pass because members know that these are common sense solutions. So I ask as you here today to try and further this conversation. I'm not passing judgment on anyone. I'm asking you to let the system work. And in the absence of allowing us to vote on this, I said, then allow the people of Minnesota to vote on a constitutional amendment. And if the vote comes back, I will honor it. If they say, no, we don't want to stop this, then that's what the people spoke. But you and I both know, every bit of data shows this, it would pass overwhelmingly. So this is the will of the people. This is the opportunity for us to do something. And I, for one, as governor, as a father, as a human being, I am done living like this, where our children have to live in fear and practice gun drills in their schools when we know there's things we can do about it. So I'm grateful you're all here, and I look forward to the questions we're going to get.
Governor, Tess Rada is a theater educator and director from Minneapolis. Her 8-year-old daughter was inside Annunciation Catholic Church in August when a gunman opened fire through the stained glass, killing 2 and injuring 30. Since then, Tess has become a passionate advocate for common sense gun laws, speaking out as both a mother and an educator. I invite Tess to make a few comments.
Thank you. Yeah, my name is Tess. I have a very sweet 8-year-old girl who goes to Annunciation Catholic School. And on August 27th, she had forgotten her lunch, so her dad was there to drop it back off for her. And when he was sitting in his car in the parking lot, he heard 116 shots go into the church. And he called me and he said, "Are you sitting down?" And I said, "Yes." And he said, I don't know anything, but I know that shots have been fired, and please don't come here, because they don't want anyone here. So of course I get in my car and I head to the school. And when I got there, I saw things that are gonna haunt me for the rest of my life. I saw parents screaming, looking for their kids, some that were never gonna find their kids because they weren't alive anymore. I saw kids covered in other kids' blood, covered in their own blood. I saw hundreds and hundreds of officers and first responders there. They got there very fast, and they really did make a huge difference. And I thought that was going to be the hardest day, but every day since then has gotten harder and harder, because none of these kids are the same. They're completely different. They're scared. We went on a field trip to the Capitol with the 3rd graders, where they got to meet the governor. And on the way there, one girl was telling me, a girl I didn't even know, but she's my daughter's classmate. She was telling me that when she hears a loud noise, her body just automatically goes down on the floor and she can't stop it. And I think that's how they all feel. They all have new things that they don't know how to understand. They're so little. Annunciation is home to preschool through 8th grade. So these kids are small. They don't know what's going on, but they are all different. And I just don't want this to happen to your community or any other community, because it is horrific. So please don't wait until it's too late, because I didn't think this would happen to me. I didn't think this would happen in my wildest nightmares, but it did. So don't wait until it happens to you. Act now.
Now I introduce Dr. Rachel Weigert. Dr. Weigert is a pediatric emergency medicine physician at Children's Minnesota. She's a gun violence prevention researcher and advocate, and the mother of 2 little girls. Despite her Wisconsin upbringing, she's a proud Gopher. She's lovingly called Minnesota home for the past 7 years. She attended medical school at the University of Wisconsin-Madison and completed her pediatric residency at Children's Hospital of Wisconsin Wisconsin, and she did her fellowship at Children's Minnesota. So I invite Dr. Weigert to make a few comments now.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Governor Walz and Senator Westland, for having me here today. And Tess, thank you for sharing this stage. I just want to wrap you up in a mom hug. I just can't. I'm so sorry. As Pastor said, I'm Dr. Rachel Weigert. I was working in the emergency department at Children's Minnesota the day of the Annunciation shooting. That shift began like many of my shifts do. I woke up early for my 7 a.m. start. My husband was driving our 2 little girls, who are 2 and 5, to their well child check. He was texting me with questions, including, "Audrey just threw up in the car. What should I do?" And I said, "Ask the doctor." Later that afternoon, after we had a chance to reconnect, he recounted that he found it odd that he was passing so many ambulances going in the same direction as he was driving to their appointment, and he knew something very, very bad had happened. Moments after we were texting each other, we got a call from Emergency Medical Services stating that we would be receiving a child, a 10-year-old, with a gunshot wound to the head. This was not super typical, so I had to kind of collect myself quickly. And within moments, we were told, this is an active shooter situation at a school, prepare for more. And so, again, I know you said you never imagined this could happen in your worst nightmare. Given the research and work I've been doing, I knew it was only a matter of time. And that is why I'm here today, and I will continue to show up to these events as much as humanly possible so that it doesn't happen to anybody else ever again. So as a level 1 pediatric trauma center at Children's Minnesota, we train regularly to respond to this type of event, but this was the largest singular trauma incident we've responded to in recent history. We only had 5 minutes to prepare, and we mobilized over 50 pediatric trained specialists into our emergency department. We expanded into rooms that we don't typically use for resuscitations because we knew we had to get ready to take care of a large amount of kids in a small amount of time. I performed that day using everything I learned in my 7 years in this role, but also balancing thoughts like the fact that my own daughter had her kindergarten open house the next day, and thinking about how terrified all the kids would have been in this nightmare situation, and that thought alone is something that still keeps me up at night. In response to my husband's text about the vomit, I said, "Mass shooting," as I made my way to our resuscitation bay. And I didn't speak to him again for the next 3 hours. As a gun violence prevention researcher, I'm well versed in the statistics, including the fact that guns have been the leading cause of death in children since 2020 and increasing since 2017 as we idly sit by. My life was changed the moment we received that phone call and that children died in their own school just 5 minutes away from my own home. And that is a parent's worst nightmare. That morning, as we took care of those kids, we quickly cut off blood-stained uniforms that were later placed into evidence bags and lined up in the hallway. Some of the kids were in shock, some were sobbing uncontrollably, and I had to remind myself repeatedly to focus on the task at hand and not let my emotions get the best of me. Because while we are prepared for events like this, it's impossible, really, truly, to prepare for something this devastating and this violating in our own community. And I'll talk more about this in a little bit, but a bullet can really do an incredible amount of damage to a small child's body. It's designed to splinter into dozens of twisted shards that could instantly kill a child. And as we said, 116 of those bullets were fired into the school that day. Some of the conversations I had with the kids that day also still haunt me. I had multiple patients who told me that they were likely shot or had shrapnel in their body because they were laying on top of smaller children that were sitting next to them. And the thing that really affects me is how quickly they acted, and they just knew to do it because they trained for it. And that I just find sick. So, as a doctor, I'm supposed to train for those events, the worst, but not kids and not our educators and not parents. We shouldn't have to deal with that on a daily basis. And so with that, I hope that we can all work together to address this public health crisis, which is what it is. It doesn't need to be a partisan issue. And our kids deserve that too, and I hope that we can center them in this conversation today. Thank you.
Now we move forward with the panelist Q&A. Questions were submitted by the public and combined by topic, so thank you to all of you who've shared your perspectives, what's on your minds, what's on your hearts. As moderator, I will ask Tesk and Dr. Weigertz the questions that were submitted by all of you. Governor Walz will take questions directly from the audience. So I will ask you to raise your hand at that time when it is Governor Walz's turn. Please state your name.
Support the idea of a ban on assault weapons, and they also support the idea of a special session for legislation for gun violence prevention. So where does all that stand?
Thanks, Lisa. Yeah, I think you're right. On the first part of that is that the data is all pretty strong on that people support this. And I would make one note that listening to the doctor talk about this, in researchers around gun violence, we want to have the best research, but I think many of you know we have been prohibited from gathering data on gun violence. It holds its own special category where we're not able to have data on it to make that case. The special session, and I asked about this after this summer of the horrors that we witnessed, and especially after Annunciation, that we need to address this now. We need to come back, and we're not in legislative session until February, and this happened over 2 months ago. So I asked legislative leaders, like we always do, let's plan for a special session, and what you do is you exchange offers of what was going to be discussed in the special session so it has parameters. And we did that. We put those things out, and we were rejected that anything that had to deal with guns would not be dealt with. We would deal with mental health. We would deal with hardening the schools, things like that. And I said, well, that's fair. We will take up these things that you brought up. We offered a chance to vote on mental health care, but you voted no on it last time. But if you're willing to vote yes on it this time, I want to do that. I'll take that up. But we are going to have a vote on, we need to have a vote on guns. We need to bring this forward. And the way the situation sets is right now, the House of Representatives is 67, I think 65 now, because of the several members leaving to go to the Senate, which means that the one person who would agree to this is the Speaker, and that Speaker is Speaker Dameth. And I've said, all I'm asking you for is we put an offer forward. We agreed to things you want to discuss and vote on. You need to give us the things we want to vote on, and they won't do it. And I say this today as that those of you who are here, this needs to be a bipartisan solution. And the legislators were invited to come here, and we could sit side by side. And as I'm putting this out, if they think my data is wrong, if they think this is not the #1 killer of children, if they think that other nations, no other nation in the world has this problem, if they don't think guns are the problem, then just say so. The problem I've got now is if we go into special session, we will never have a vote on guns. And the special session will grind to a halt. It will bring people in, and in fact, it'll be about everything else. And once that became clear that we weren't going to be able to have a special session to move on these, and I have a whole proposal, and I said I'm willing to shrink it down to the high-capacity magazines, but the courts overruled us on binary triggers and ghost guns. You can print a gun in your house now with no serial number on it, and according to the Supreme Court here in Minnesota, you can have that. The binary trigger is the device that was used to murder 2 police officers and a firefighter last year by firing rapid fire. I mean, you pull the trigger and you let go of the trigger, it shoots both ways. Those folks in here who are lawful gun owners know that's dangerous, and they don't have that. They don't want that. So I'm frustrated that we simply want to get a vote, and then I said, we'll give on some of these other things. How about we come into a special session and we vote on putting onto the ballot a constitutional amendment on the ban of this? And they have said no. And so as governor, I cannot force the legislature and the division of powers to take this up. If I call the special session, it will grind to a halt and will not move to this. And so our next move is simply coming to the public and saying, you guys should do something about this. You should have a discussion. And I think the thing that's really heartbreaking here is that we know what the numbers show around the assault weapon ban and things, but this would be an opportunity for us to fund some mental health care that is needed. It would be the opportunity to fund some of these things that there's bipartisan agreement on. But all of those things are going to be held up over the leverage of not having the legislature to do it. So we're still hopeful. We're still putting the pressure on. When 100, 150 people gather on a Monday, They gathered in Rochester last week. They gathered in the western suburbs the week before. I'm going to continue doing this until we finally get a vote, and most importantly, until we finally ban these weapons in Minnesota and protect our children. That is what we have to do, and find the path to get to that.
Thank you, Governor Walz. Now a question for Tess Rada. The question that everyone is asking is, first, how are the children? Secondly, how are the families doing? And can you give us an update on your community, how things stand today at Annunciation? And then lastly, what do you and the Annunciation community want to see happen right now?
So this is kind of complicated, but I think the answer that makes people feel better to hear and that people want to hear is that kids are resilient and they're strong, and our community is helping us get through this tough time. And those things are true, but that's not the whole truth. And I don't think that, I don't know one Annunciation parent who would say that they or their student are doing well right now. My daughter is 8, and there was kids as young as 6 in the church. They saw their classmates get murdered in front of them in a shooting where they were also, they were trying to be murdered. And so the daughter, like I said before, the daughter I had before August 27th and the daughter I have now are very different people. And I told the governor I'm getting to know her all over again because she is completely different. Because I don't think that kids were meant to watch their classmates get torn to shreds in front of them. And I don't think they were meant to be covered in their classmates' blood. And I don't think they're supposed to attend their other classmates' funerals. And it really makes me wonder how students who go through this are supposed to be productive when they get older. How are they supposed to be productive members of society when they're going to essentially be having war flashbacks for the rest of their lives? We're failing them in such a deep way. We're failing them now, and we're failing society when they grow up. Because how is anybody supposed to live when that happened to them? So our community is strong and resilient, and we love each other, and we're helping each other, but this never should have happened, and we're not really doing okay. And we want weapons of war off the streets, off the shelves as soon as possible. That is what we want. We do not want this to happen to anyone. So we don't know the best way. We're not lawmakers. We don't know how to get there, but that is what we want. We want weapons of war off the shelves and out of the hands of people who want to hurt others.
Thank you, Tess. Question now for Dr. Weigert. Candidly, most people don't have an understanding of what happens when someone is shot with an assault weapon. What do you wish policymakers and the public understand about what it's like to treat a child with a gunshot wound?
So I appreciated reading this question because candidly, I don't think I knew exactly, until I went through my training either, because why should we have to know that? So a bullet from an assault weapon is designed essentially to explode internally on contact. So when it hits the soft tissue of a body, the bullet itself starts to topple end over end, meaning that it can end up in an entirely different trajectory than it started. And it also explodes internally, causing up to like 15 centimeters of damage, which is about this big. And if you picture a small child, that's the majority of their torso. That's their heart, that's their lungs, those are their major vessels, and that's why they die instantly, a lot of them. And a lot of these kids also had significant vessel injuries elsewhere in their body just from the shrapnel, because it explodes into dozens of extremely sharp pieces of metal. And so that is ultimately why it can be so incredibly damaging. Even one bullet can kill them. And when you can fire 116 in just over a minute, it's impossible to imagine the damage that can occur.
Thank you, Dr. Weigert. Question now for Governor Walz. Raise your hand if you have one.
So I just have a question on numbers. One of the things I heard when there was discussion about the special session was a Republican said, I can't support a ban on assault weapons because the farmers would be upset and not be able to protect. What are the numbers? I mean, why do we need an assault weapon for a farmer to protect their property? I don't get it. I mean, is that really a case that the rural Minnesota needs assault weapons to protect property? It just doesn't make sense. Are there numbers on that? I don't understand.
Yeah, there are numbers, and I just think we always ground ourselves in this entire conversation. No other group of parents in any other nation in the world is having to have this conversation because it happens here. And it happens here because we have over 400 million firearms out on the streets, 40,000 a day being sold. And the question about, look, I am a gun owner. I have 4 shotguns and I have a Springfield 1903 30-06 deer rifle that's there. I've had them growing up. The gray hair folks in here will know. It was a different time. We took our shotguns to school. They were definitely in your car. In some cases, they were in your football locker. And then after practice, you went out and you could hunt. But what you just heard the numbers is, in the last 10 years, there's been a 100% increase in the number of these mass shootings. And what has really added to this is the ability of these cheap weapons that were designed for the battlefield, designed to kill human beings, have made their way into civilian hands. Now look, you've got the rights in this country to own and buy firearms, but just like your automobile, and I heard one legislator said, look, this is what I do for stress relief. I like to go plink. Well, your hobby doesn't supersede our children's right to survive. Your personal freedoms of this, I might like to drive 100 miles an hour, but the law says if you do that, you're putting other people at risk, so we limit that. Firearms have been protected from this, and this idea that you need it for personal safety, that's fine. There are numerous things, but for a home invasion, these are not the things, and not the things to protect your family with. And the fact of the matter is, we know this. If you have a firearm in your house, your chance of being shot increased greatly with that firearm. And I just want to note is trying to get common sense legislation through this legislature. We have courageous legislators who got this done. We couldn't even pass a safe storage bill. And there's not hardly a week goes by where a child doesn't find an unlocked gun and shoot either themselves or a cousin or the neighbor or sibling. That's just irresponsible. And so this argument, and it's always something, you can't define what an assault weapon is. We have the right to have these, that they're to be used against an oppressive government or whatever it might be. None of those hold any water. And we have had restrictions since the 1930s on fully automatic firearms. We are not asking for anything out of the ordinary here other than safe storage of firearms that are meant to, whether it's personal protection, hunting, target shooting. Just because you can have one of these things doesn't mean you should. And I think we're trying to make that case. So your point is well taken. I respect firearm owners. I respect Second Amendment rights. But over the years, we've conflated these things. And we've allowed the firearms industry to conflate these things. As a homeowner, if you go to get insurance and you have a trampoline, your insurance rates goes up because the neighborhood kids are going to break an arm on your trampoline. Trust me, we've had them, and that's just how it goes. Or if you have a dog, your insurance rates will go up because your dog might bite someone. They don't ask you about your firearms. And the firearms industry has done a magnificent job of not asking physicians of people in mental health crisis to be able to ask if they have a firearm in the home. That's not to deny your Second Amendment rights. That's to make sure that if you or someone in your family is in a mental health crisis, we remove that firearm from there. None of those things stop people from protecting their property. None of them stops the ability to be able to do that. So again, you'll keep seeing the goalposts move on this, and you'll hear, this is, it was the tobacco industry was good at this, called the merchants of doubt. Oh, we just can't be sure it's going to do this. Yes, we're sure. We're sure that more people die when they have these weapons of war They die here in this country where they don't die in other countries, and children are particularly susceptible because of what you heard from the doctor.
Thank you, Governor Walz. Next question for Tess. What does freedom mean when parents fear sending their kids to school?
So, freedom to me means that you don't need to be afraid of anything. And you don't need to be afraid, certainly, that your kid is going to be killed while they're sitting in school or in church. We know, obviously, the right to bear arms is constitutionally protected, but I think the right to send your kid to school and not be afraid that they're not going to come home is kind of an unspoken right. I think it's kind of a right who would have thought that needed to be put in the Constitution? But so when the Constitution was written and the amendments were written, we didn't have these weapons of war doing this. And I genuinely think our founding fathers who wrote these would be disgusted that this Second Amendment is being used for this, that is being used to make it so that we cannot ban these guns that are always killing children, that are killing children every single day. So I want everybody to be able to go to school and not fear for their life. I want my kid to not have to worry about that anymore. And, you know, one of the new questions that I know a lot of us Annunciation parents are getting asked by their kids is, am I safe here? Sometimes we'll go to a new place and they'll say, am I safe here? And to me, freedom would be me being able to say, yes, you are safe here, but I cannot say that truthfully to her, that she's safe, because I thought that in a church at school, I thought that would be the safest place she could be, but it wasn't. There isn't a safe place right now. It could happen anywhere. So freedom really means not having to worry about that, and I don't think we should have to worry about that, but we're not there yet.
Can I add one note to this to just think about this? Those Annunciation parents and teachers and students came last month to come see their capital. It's what they come to visit, and they were in the governor's reception room. Just think about this. I have asked for and have been told no, that there is nothing, and Minnesota is one of very few states that does this. Those children could have come to there, and had someone wanted to stand outside there with assault weapons or have firearms in that building, in my reception room where those children were, they can legally do that. And when I have asked the legislators to stop that and to not have firearms in a place where we're debating on this, the answer was absolutely not. So the idea that these parents had to go through the Annunciation shooting and had to come to a state capitol where people are fighting harder to keep those firearms in that capitol than to keep them out of that school, that is disgraceful. And so we're not asking for anything ridiculous. We're not asking for anything extreme. We're asking for the capitol, just for God's sakes, they don't even do it in Alabama. There's things that, why are we doing this in Minnesota, and why are we making that case that we can't? What would that do to stop your Second Amendment rights to not have a firearm in a crowded capitol where emotions can get high? I mean, just think about it. If you could legally, I guess, carry a live chainsaw into that building, but people would say, are you out of your mind? Why can you carry in a weapon of war? And you got folks trying to defend that. So I'll make the case that you could feel it, and you could feel with these children coming in and the sense of joy they had, but you could see it on the parents' faces, that there's this always living with this new reality. So just an addendum. I would add this, we do not need guns in the state capitol. I'm going to throw that out there. We do not.
Question for Dr. Weigert. Gun violence is now the leading cause of death for American children and teens. How can we treat this as a public health crisis? What are the steps that we should be taking?
I think this is a perfect question because it depoliticizes it. It is a public health crisis. Just like when you were talking about you can't drive your car 100 miles down the freeway. It was funny because I was like, okay, this is like dinner table talk in my home between my husband and I. These are the exact conversations we have. It wasn't miraculous that motor vehicle collisions decreased as the leading cause of death in children. That was because of safe seatbelt laws, car seat laws, better education around car seats, because even if there is a law, we need to educate people about how to enforce it and how to do things safely in their home. And it is really, really so frustrating to know that this isn't new, that this is the leading cause of death in children. It has been for 5 years now, almost 6. And it's been increasing for longer than that. So in my mind, taking a step back and looking at this as a multifaceted issue where the gun is the tool that is utilized in a variety of ways. Accidental injuries by young children as young as age 2 can accidentally pull a trigger on a firearm. Older children and teens often will commit suicide very quickly. From the moment they decide to the moment they do it, a third is about within 5 minutes. And same for assault. And a lot of it is in kids who actually don't even have a history of mental health issues. And so talking about different ways to prevent these injuries, one of which is an assault weapons ban, but another is or would be strengthening our child access prevention laws, which I know we did attempt to do, and I'm sure we will continue to attempt to do in this state. And I'll talk about secure storage more with one of the other questions, but that is definitely, in my opinion, one of the easiest, most sort of like gun owner focused, responsible individual ways that we can tackle this greater public health issue. And also just people showing up to events like this and using your voice to contact your lawmakers, talking about this, even though it might feel contentious, but say, hey, I went to one of these events and I learned this kind of crazy fact. Thanksgiving and Christmas are coming up, you guys. We'll have chances to talk with family and friends. Maybe it's only at my dinner table that we have these kind of conversations, but this is how you have to do it. Little by little by little, person to person, humanize it, don't demonize it, don't make it about the gun. We're focusing on children's safety. So.
Thank you, Dr. Weigert. Time for another question for Governor Walz.
Hello, my name is George Meredith, okay, and I'd like to, you've mentioned, Governor, the comparison between the United States and overseas countries, okay, and in particular, when we take a look at countries, the Scandinavian countries, because of our a lot of Scandinavian background here, in Sweden, the firearm homicide rate is 25% of what it is in Minnesota. Minnesota is a lot less than the United States generally. In Denmark and in Norway, it is 1/10 of what it is here. Would you consider establishing a task force to examine how they manage this issue in those countries so that we can learn from the best practices? Because you as a coach and a teacher know that learning from and copying best practices is the way to continually improve substantially.
Well, yes. Well, thank you, George. And he is correct. Yes, the answer is yes. And that is the purpose of the special session, to hold hearings, to have these conversations. We are prohibited from gathering a lot of this data. We're prohibited from having these discussions, and I think most of us know this. And I just would tell you, Finland is another one of these. Everybody in Finland owns a gun. They do have gun ownership. They have but it's responsible. They have it. They don't have these mass shootings. And so I continue, and this is, again, the bipartisan nature of this. We have crafted this, and I say we being the big general United States, not the people in this room or those against it, but that this is seen as almost like the uniform you wear and you've got to be with your team. I watch Republican legislators talk about how they have to defend these guns, and I know they've never fired a gun in their life. I know they've never been around them, but it's part of being on the team. It is possible to know that this is something that would be smart to do, and you can disagree with the politics of the party on this, on either side that you're on. It is, you could say, you know what, Walz is wrong about every other issue, but he's right about this one, so I'm with you on this. You can go vote accordingly on that, But we have got a situation now where people are clinging to the political identity over the actual issue what George is talking about. Because when you put this to the test, when you put it to the data, and I say this as this is evolving, as you heard this happen, I say this as someone who grew up around firearms and was on the other side of this issue. But the times have changed. The situation has changed. The availability of these weapons have changed. And so that's why legislators, and we have one here with us today in Senator Seeberger, who has done this. I said, this is what you want your legislators to be like. And I can tell you this from experience. Senator Seeberger is a DFLer, but that doesn't mean she's agreeing with me just because I say it, and we've been through that before. And we go back, that's the way it's supposed to be. And we talk about the issues. And the senator has been a staunch supporter of the Second Amendment, just like myself. But she's looked at this data, as others, and said, look, we could do something about this. So George, yes, 100%. We would do that. I want these town halls to have this. The press is here to tell these stories. Do other countries kill their children at a rate that America does? And then you look at the data, and the answer is no. Is it because America has something unique? They keep bringing up mental health issues. They have mental health issues in other countries too. Access to firearms. Other countries have access to firearms with reasonable guardrails around what that means. So yes, the answer is yes. It's what we should be doing. It's why it's so frustrating that we can't even have a special session where those are the types of things we could agree on to put those in place. And think about this, to go back to. We asked for a simple measure that you should lock your firearm, and if it's stolen, you should report it to the police. Those were voted down. And I will tell you this, legislators stood on the floor and said, extreme risk protection orders will save no lives. They have saved lives. The data is there. We can prove that. And I will say the same thing. If we get a ban on assault weapons and high-capacity magazines, fewer people will get shot in Minnesota and die. That is simply the way the data is, and that's one that I'm willing to say we need to fight for.
Thank you, Governor Walz. Question now for Tess. How do we shift the national conversation from partisan politics to shared responsibility for saving lives?
I think the fact that this is a partisan issue is goofy beyond belief. I think it does not need to be that way. I want to talk a little bit about the kids that lost their lives at Annunciation, because we all love our kids. We all want our kids to be safe. And we lost 2 kids, 8-year-old Fletcher Merkel, who has been in my daughter's class since preschool, who was silly and goofy and was in a band with his classmates called Blood Alien, and was just a goofy kid. And then 10-year-old Harper Moisky, who was sassy and talked back and was really, really fun and lovely, and she loved the movie Trolls. These are just normal kids. They were just kids like everybody's kids. And when a mass shooting happens, the bullets, they don't target kids based on who their parents voted for. And they don't target kids based on how much money their parents have or what color their skin is. In fact, at Annunciation, the gunman never saw the kids at all. It didn't matter. That gunman just wanted to kill kids. So remembering that these are real kids, this could happen to absolutely anybody. It does not matter what political party you are affiliated with. It could happen to anybody. And we all love our kids, so let's love them enough to stop pointing fingers at the other side and to stop getting caught up in petty semantics about like what an assault rifle is. And frankly, to stop messing around and just do what needs to be done to keep our kids safe. We all love our kids. Let's love them enough to not do this anymore.
Thank you, Tess. Final question, Dr. Weigert. From a medical perspective, what are the most effective public health strategies to reduce firearm injuries among children?
I just want to say that I think it's unfair that I have to follow Tess repeatedly. So my personal favorite, and this is the one that I focus on in my own research at Children's Minnesota, is focused around safe storage. So we know that laws, especially in this current climate, are going to take a long time, potentially, to get passed. I hope not, and bills get voted down and things happen. But one thing that we can do is work person to person and encourage secure storage. So one thing that we're focusing on currently at Children's Minnesota is we're going to start screening and talking about, is your child ever around a firearm anywhere? And how is that firearm stored? Maybe they don't know. Here, that's a great start. Let's ask. And then we're also going to be handing out cable locks and lock boxes and educating folks about how to securely store their firearms and their ammunition. So I think that's honestly one of the easiest ways. It's inexpensive. I wish it was a requirement when you purchased a firearm that it needed to come with some sort of secure storage device that you had to purchase both together. But that's not the case yet. So hopefully someday, maybe someday. So that is one of the things that we talk about. Another one that I really love to focus on as a mom of young kids who are very curious is talking to other parents or other family members when your child is going to somebody else's home, just saying, hey, I ask this of everybody, wherever my kid goes, if you have any guns in your house, how are they stored? Or how are guns stored in your house? And they might say, hey, we don't have any. And you're like, great, good to know. And you can change your mind. If they say, yeah, we have hunting rifles, they're not locked up, we like to have, or we have a handgun, we like to have it accessible in case of an intruder or something like that. Then you can say, you know what, I'd rather if we meet at our house or meet at a park. So there are different options to have that conversation and normalize that conversation. And I think the more we have it and focus it just on our child's safety instead of this like super politicized language, I think that can help to kind of take the tone down too around the conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Weigert. That brings to a close our interaction here. I invite up to the stage Senator Judy Seeberger. Thank you, panelists, for a wonderful presentation, insightful responses, and may we all work together to make Minnesota the safer place that we all want it to be.
Thank you all for being here today, and thank you to our panelists for this conversation and Governor Walz. My name is Judy Seeberger, and I'm the state senator for Senate District 41, which includes Afton, Cottage Grove, Hastings, Grant, and Lake Elmo. I'm also a lawyer, a first responder, and a mom. It has been a hard year for Minnesota. From the assassinations of Melissa and Mark Hortman, and the attempted assassinations of John, Yvette, and Hope Hoffman, to the Annunciation shooting. My heart was broken along with yours in the wake of this violence. As parents, we should be worrying about whether our kids are learning algebra and making friends, not whether they are going to come home scared because there was an active shooter drill at school today. We should be worried about whether our older kids are adjusting to college life and figuring out how to do their own laundry, not whether they're going to come home at all because there's been yet another mass shooting. We've worked hard these past 3 years to pass legislation that prevents these tragedies: extreme risk protection orders, expanded background checks, and a ban on binary triggers. And those steps we've taken are working and are saving lives. They are a good start, but we know there is much more to do, much more. Senate DFLers were quick to respond after the Annunciation shooting, pulling together a working group to try to find bipartisan support for a package that addresses the access to guns, mental health, school safety, and more. And we stand ready to do the real work to keep Minnesotans safe from gun violence. However, with the current balance of the legislature, progress is going to require our Republican colleagues to join us to protect our kids, and I encourage each and every one of them to do so. Sensible gun violence prevention shouldn't be a partisan issue, and that's where we need your help. Call your senators, your representatives, write letters and emails, show up at the Capitol, and demand that we pass a package focused on reducing gun violence, preventing guns from falling into hands of folks who shouldn't have them, and keeping our kids safe when we start session in February. It's going to take Democrats and Republicans, parents and doctors, teachers, students, and people from Worthington to Stillwater to Roseau, coming together and agreeing that our kids deserve more, that we all deserve to be safe in our homes, our schools, and walking down the main streets of Minnesota. Thank you all for being part of that movement today.